good will be my audio. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings. Please let me know if you can hear me. I'm not sure. I'm using a laptop instead of my phone, so let me know if you can hear me. Just a comment would do. Probably would inform that you are able to hear me. So if you can hear me, just let me know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can. So. Can anybody hear me? Hopefully, yes. Auntie Madeline, stop asking me about pigs. Not sure if they. Oh, great! Thank you. I just got the messages. Thank you very much. So, a couple of things. This conversation will be very different from every other. I think mostly we tend to shy away from some conversations that are very necessary in our society, and that is why the current regime takes us for granted and those things that are not really what we expected. But it will be important to look at governance in our country and do some comparative analysis. Oftentimes, you hear ministers in Adam Barrow's regime telling us what they've done for the Gambia as if they're doing us favors and the reason why they got to continue ruling our country, even though we had expected that the change of regime from Jammeh to Barrow was going to be a transition of 3 years, and then we have elections and then have pure democracy where term limit 50 plus one, constitutional reforms, the TRRC, the Dane Commission, the Lands Commission, and a lot of commissions that were established by the regime would have brought us some fruition that the country would have got to a point that, by now, we would have a president who is thinking of, after a second term would actually leave for, another president to come. But that has not been the case. What has been the case? We have somebody who thought he tricked us, lied to us, told us all kind of things that are just completely untrue, and turn around to say, I am not going anywhere, and he's going to stay for 15 years, 20 years or more. But often, what are the things that the ministers under his regime would tell you? Barrow has done a lot of good. He has given you democracy. Nobody gave Gambians democracy. The democracy that is in the Gambia is fought hardly by the Gambian people and not just an individual. Again, look at this individual. Where was Adama Barrow during the 22 years of Jammeh's regime? What has he done and what was he known for? Because Barrow was never any prominent person known to be fighting against Jammeh's regime. We have seen the likes of Banka Mane, my personal uncle, who had fought tooth and nail for, against the Jammeh regime, lost everything probably, if not just his life, but had really nothing to do with this regime. That is why when you're fighting regimes at some point, you got to be careful. Sometimes you do so for the greater good of the country and not for personal interest. But now we have a regime built on deception, lies, fabrications, and just greed for just selfish desire for self-perpetuation, and of course, against the people's or the general will of the Gambian people. Now, this is something that we all got to consider. And then let's do a comparative analysis. They keep telling us that they're doing fantastically well in the country. Let's give a little comparison between Jammeh and Barrow. First, we must admit that Jammeh had killed a lot more people in the Gambia, abused human rights, and of course, denied Gambians their liberty. Nobody can deny that. That is a fact that existed. And where people are denied their liberty, then it's more or less like you've denied them everything. This was a great issue during the Jammeh regime, where people cannot freely speak their mind. People are arbitrarily arrested, go to work and they don't return home. People are killed within the government system. You want this job, it kills you. You attempt a coup, he kills you. So he was quite well known for torture and, of course, brutalizing humans. This is very true. Nobody can deny that. Put that aside. That is what I personally consider to be the biggest issues that Jammeh had committed, and nothing can go beyond that, because the worst cruelty that you can do to a human being is by killing them. The most cruel person to a human would be the person that probably could kill you. Beyond killing, nothing anybody can do. Now, if you compare that to the Barrow regime, Jammeh killed a lot of people. That does not mean that Barrow's regime did not kill anybody. This regime killed 3 people in Faraba Bantang whose only crime was to fight against injustice, fight against defending their land, fight against defending their women guarding, fight against somebody who want to, mortgage their livelihood. So this government is complicit and, of course, culpable in the killing of the Faraba Bantang folks who were only there to defend what they own. So nobody can tell us that Barrow never killed anybody or his regime never killed anybody. That's a blatant disregard to facts. Again, it's under this Barrow regime that they killed Aruna Jatta in Fonyi somewhere, probably Jammeh's village or Kanilai or wherever. It is under this regime that somebody on police custody died in police custody. Now, it is under this regime that young people in Gunjur who were defending against, fish meal factories were arrested and detained. And it is under this regime that people will kill ordinary Gambians, and of course, they will facilitate their escape and run into, other countries. All of those things we are seeing. So, the levels are very different, but doesn't mean that this government has a 0 and the other government has 100 or 200 or 300. But of course, Jammeh outshined, Barrow when it comes to killing people, which is quite a notorious act that his regime was very well known for. But the lies and deceptions in the Barrow regime are that Barrow has done more infrastructural development, or he has done more than, the PPP and the, APRC regime. That's a blatant lie. First, let's look at education. Say everything about Jammeh, but that's the guy that brought in equity and equality in our education system. Because prior to that, it was the sons and daughters of the privileged. Because the PPP regime deliberately and intentionally refused to build schools, refused to build a university, refused to ensure that every Gambian has equal opportunities and access to education, because they were going to keep their monopolies to make sure that other people are deprived of education, so that there won't be, that kind of competition for jobs in the country. And it was only the children of the ministers and the folks, the elites, who were going to Forabe College, who were going to the United States, who were going to the United Kingdom to get education, but not the sons and daughters of the poor peasant Gambians. That's the fact. But he brought about equity in our country, that the sons and daughters of the poor got equal access like any other person to education. That is why today we have a lot of Gambians progressively doing well around the globe. People that went to the University of the Gambia, built by Yaya Jammeh, and of course inaugurated by Yaya Jammeh, are the people that are doing exceptionally well internationally. So robini mo sida ka ko baro minke jang mo ko te mo ke jang Yaya Jammeh mo ke jang PPP regime mo ke o mangi tonyat alta baro sindila jang katambi sanji tanade ini mol kambenda sanji sabale bora sanji sabaina ra sanji tay ko hani sa man kanyang ita mano iyalon ko mano hanwo be ko ita bulaje. So education wise, Yahya Jammeh's regime was able to keep the Gambia College floating, in a sense that sons and daughters of the poor from the rural communities could come to Combo, get a place to stay within the college, get a stipend of over $390 to keep yourself ongoing, and of course get free education at the Gambia College to be able to get a job later and support your family. But what did this regime do? They brought in fees into the Gambia College. Of course, you got to pay tens of thousands of dollars is to be able to go to college. Sons and daughters of the patient no longer can afford to go to college. They got to struggle. A lot of people are turned to become beggars, asking people for money to pay their tuitions because they want better lives for themselves. So what have they done better for the education sector? Telling people that, oh no, we build 10 classrooms every week. But of course, you've not made education affordable for people. What used to be free now is paid for. So what have you done better comparatively? Jammeh built the University of the Gambia, gave scholarships to thousands of people. At the end of every graduation, picked the best and sent them to study internationally. Sent a lot of people to Venezuela, sent a lot of people to Cuba, sent a lot of people to the United States and other places to get an education, to come back and develop the country. What has the Barrow regime done to boost, education in our country? Of course, they're building, new academic institutions here and there. But comparatively, has that outshined the Jammeh regime? No, they cannot, and they will never do. And all these lots you're hearing about the University of the Gambia Faraba Bantang projects are Jammeh's project, because these are, IDB projects that basically were signed and, of course, started implementing since the Jammeh days. So that cannot be Barrow's, gesture or probably his goodwill or his foresight. No. Now come to the health sector. Jammeh killed a lot of people. Terrible leadership, we can say. But again, which government, out of its negligence, corruption, and misappropriation of funds, and of course, poor procurement of pharmaceutical, products, led to the killing of over 70 children in our country? The dilapidated nature of our healthcare system today is worse than you can ever imagine. That even your animals you will not take some of them to some of our healthcare facilities under Adam Barrow's regime. That people who are giving millions for malaria programs would criminally connive to eat all that money just for them to actually find themselves in jail. So what has Barrow done in our health sector that was not done prior? Which major hospitals have they built and, of course, furnished and make sure that there is medicine and people get the necessary health care they need? Even with your money, you will not get, proper health care in the Gambia. What has Barrow done? What improvement has it done for the medical doctors to have specialized trainings overseas? Practically nothing. And these were things that the former regime, in as much as we can say all kind of bad, was doing to ensure that Gambians got that medical attention. Of course, travel overseas, get specialized skills, come back to work. Probably not for everybody, but a few people were actually, trained to become experts in their field. So you can never change those narratives. You're not doing that. Come to agriculture. You can say everything about Jammeh, but that guy was a champion agriculturist, and he was helping the Gambian people a lot in the agricultural sector. But what has the Barrow regime done? Jammeh had a lot of tractors that were distributed to farmers across the country. But what did Barrow do? One of his commissions actually seized all these tractors from Gambian farmers, sold it to themselves, the criminals within those commissions, and of course, deprive farmers of those, tractors, and the regime went on to buy donkeys and donate donkeys to Gambian farmers. This is what Barrow has reduced our agriculture to. And of course, got somebody who probably, I don't know what he studied, either nursing or whatever, they call him a doctor, nobody knows where he acquired a PhD, and all of a sudden, he is the agriculture minister who knows nothing about agriculture, not a subject area expert, nothing. And of course, even the technicians there, you can question what exactly they're doing. How far has our agriculture gone? Compared to the former regime, and now it's like agriculture has sinked beyond repair. So what has Barrow done in transforming our agricultural sector to something else? Absolutely nothing. And you come to the natural resource sector, where Jammeh had monopolized it. It has become a family business for him, where his own family, was involved in the mining here and there. But what did the Barrow regime do? From Jammeh's family to actually Barrow's political associates and, of course, funders of the NPP. Because we know that the people in the mining sector are major funders of the NPP. So it's from Jammeh's family to Barrow and his associates. What has changed? Nothing. But of course, it's this same regime that killed 2 police officers in their line of duty. So what is the difference when it comes to human rights records? Worse than one could imagine. Guilty as charged. both regimes. But if you tell us that Jammeh is that bad person, yet you can actually go and sell his cars for 5,000, tell us that all his flock of sheep, died, that none of them was sold, you can only tell that to, probably deaf and dumb. Even the deaf and dumb will not agree to that. So that tells that the regime is as cruel and criminal as anything you can ever imagine. Look at it from public sector corruption. You can say that Jammeh was the only corrupt person in this regime, and if you do any malpractice, it puts you in jail, or probably you suffer the consequences. But in Barrow's regime, corruption and public sector theft has been normalized and institutionalized. That is where people can actually take millions and then they probably would just go scot-free for nothing. And we have seen that. It is under this regime that came in the pretext that we are going to bring you a new constitution, F9. We are going to, get you, a TRRC. That I heard one of the ministers, Dr. Ismail Assisi, try to brag about that the recommendations were accepted. But what have you done about the recommendations? Nothing. And the president came out to tell us that Isafal was politicizing the commission, discrediting the commission he himself established, or the National Assembly established. The Janneh Commission, a total failure. That's a disaster. So what has this government done? Established a commission to, of course, later establish a committee to actually investigate the commission. It's like investigating the investigator. That tells a lot about the regime, where even the president is complicit in the acquisition of the materials belonging to the former president. Again, before even the commission started, they looted most of the assets that were in the banks. They never even waited for the commission to start. You did better than somebody else, probably nothing. So to say that Barrow has done so well for the Gambian people, the road infrastructure, you are not the person that built the bridges. You're not the person that actually, got the road from Brikama all the way to Basse. No. How long are the roads that you're making? And most of these OIC roads were more or less the Jammeh projects. So you actually met all of those, even though government is continuity. But what have you initiated and completed as a regime? That's what we did not lay hands on. Everything you initiated have all failed, including your death at Bad Lands Commission. But not all yaya mulla bankol nindula kotangol be table atol murun tatol ko alka talal da malutema. Like yaya took all our lands, yes, but you seized those lands and of course shared it among your ministers. What is the difference? Infrastructurally, you will not do what the guy did. But to tell people that, oh yeah, we give you liberty, you can say whatever you want to say. But of course, you move the bag of rice from probably 900 to 2,500 and above. It is under this regime that a bag of cement would have moved from either 200 or 250 to 600 because of your monopolies that you want to just satisfy the people that are part of your political movement, who are major funders of your politics. You want to give them all those monopolies so that they can suffocate the ordinary Gambian people to actually ensure that your politics survives. This is the regime we have in place. So to say 10 years is not enough, that is basically what you never wanted to be enough, because you had always have that insatiable desire for power. You are power hungry, and all you ever wanted was to self-perpetuate. So what Adam Barrow la mansa kundaya munake Gambia mi yalon ko nena mankeje wala mi mukude mi yalon ko ni aji ya bogo bar ni mansa kundaya ku keja na min na manke, because OIC was a bigger risk for Jammeh to stay in power, because changing the Gambia into an Islamic state to entice the Arabs, because the West has given their back to him, to make sure that there are some developments in the Gambia, was a risky thing to take, because of course a set of people in our society will not believe in that, and they will be angry and they will vote against you. And that's exactly what happened. But of course you are now using those projects to self-perpetuate and tell people that, oh yeah, and to tell people that you are the lion killer or you brought about the change. That's not true. That's a blatant lie. The resilience and the resistance of the United Democratic Party for 22 years, where you were not even known, brought about a lot in the Gambia. The jailing of its membership in the country actually brought about a lot of things. And of course, Jammeh's continual and perpetual killing of Gambians like an eagle above chicks, and then nobody knows who is going to be picked tomorrow, was enough reason for people to resist and say, I might be the next victim, therefore I cannot continue to vote for this regime. But you cannot tell us that you've done way better than the Jammeh regime. No. Educationally, no. Health-wise, no. Infrastructurally, no. In terms of, diplomacy and, of course, the relevance and importance of the Gambia around the globe, no. So what have you brought to the Gambia? Increased poverty, hardship, seizing people's lands, and of course, sharing it among your ministers, destroying our ecosystems through mining operations of your, political associates, and of course, over exploitation of our marine resources. Security-wise, killing of Gambians in their homes, in the streets, at work is not even stopping. So what have you done? Simply to disarm our army for 8 good years, simply because what? You want to keep economic for just one person to continue ruling, and you did not see 10 years to be enough. We will resist. We will resist, because if you want to turn yourself into a screw, we will become screwdrivers and unscrew ourselves. We will not let any other person cage this country again. Woku dan dulala bala hadama dum ka wasale. Allah tonya fo balia lan na tambira bangola banko kambar han wo be alkalta bolaje muna dum munyenti. You want to tell me the entire your political, nobody is saying don't put up a candidate, but it cannot be you. Respect the Gambian people. And to tell people that, he has a legitimacy to run. Okay, you have a legitimacy to run. We the people, of course, power resides in the people, and the people would have that power to tell you that, no, we don't want you. You can force yourself to actually stay, but the people can also come out to say, we don't want you, enough is enough. And nobody can stop that. Nobody can stop that. Because if you can kill police officers, and of course everybody sitting down and watching you like nothing happens. And now what you people are trying to do is to entice the police, to try to cajole them. That is why for the first time you went to a police pass out ceremony. You've never been to one. In police olta keno la kilindi karila man sakunda le police olofa. Nim police betonya for le mimba ju so kono wala nyindi ko, they all know that your regime is complicit in the killing of the cops. So, ladies and gentlemen, we did not come here to stay too long. I listened to Ismail Assise telling that, Barrow give Gambians democracy, talking about TRRC. TRRC, me, along is a total failure. For 8 years, what have you done? Nothing. Alle commission on mimbelo ndi almurun dal keda sunsulu tolti. Alle fengo be sunya la na tambi sunya ro mi alon ko monena me mira la nyumbangoka. You've discredited our country to a point that you are even sending our young people to go and work in farms in Europe. Modern day slavery. This is the government that actually kind of sends its young folks, able, bodied men to go and work in plantations in Europe. It is this government that will actually come out and tell us that all the flock of sheep of the former president all died. That a car could be sold for $5,000. That you could kill 70 children and expect nothing to come out of it. The case has been in court for so long, it will never end, because they keep telling, go and negotiate with government. What are you going to negotiate with government? Alia wandi dingolo fa tilimbalian in tajinitan in joyan in hasidialaka and Allah wasabalia. Oto Gambian ko lanyanta alonako. It's time for a united opposition to ensure that this regime is ousted, because this regime is good for nothing. Namange tilimbalian in joyat. You know how many families in Gambia go to sleep without food? These folks don't care about you. And it's the same people that will jump and tell you that, oh no, we are going to vote for this regime. And then the advice to the opposition is that many a times, this regime feeds on deception, divide and rule, because in another fintila no kavumole konga nyinna kali kukendol to me atina, you need to continue to vote for this regime. But all they keep telling you is, oh, we give you freedom. Freedom when you have nothing to eat. What kind of freedom is that? But all that they do is to come and play tribe ethnic, division, and they will jump and say some rubbish to some ethnicities and expect the opposition to respond in that light, so that they can anger certain people in society, and then those people will say, oh, we are not going to vote for you here and there. What the opposition got to do is to focus on what you want to do and what you could do for the Gambian people, and not to follow these people in their negative ethnic rhetorics, because that is all they play for their politics, because their politics depends on it. And they think Gambians are not wise enough to understand or to account government on what it is doing and what it is not doing, and the bad things that they are doing in government, and to make sure that it is ousted. But of course, to focus our minds on tribal, divisions, which does not make any sense, because no ethnicity goes to a market to buy something for $1 and another buys it for $5. Collectively, we got to understand that the Gambia is the common denominator, and the state of our government is the worst that we can ever imagine. Not just the economy, not just the level of corruption, not just insecurity in the country. Only one man is secured in that country. That's the president, because you cannot have your next door neighbor, in your state house controlling everything in our country, including our intelligence. Wala neka sojarol je kata mola duol fa ka duol ko ngol kuntu kata ka manade malla ala buaya man tambi wala. These rituals and all this nonsense, just like somebody went and killed a hippo and brought it to the seat of presidency for the president to stand and say, we are donating a hippo to you. These people don't even care about the well-being of our environment and, of course, wildlife. All I know, they're getting crocodiles and start butchering them for meat because probably they're hungry. So before you support this regime, think and think twice. For some of you who think everything is about your ethnic identity does not put any food on anybody's table. The longer this regime stays, the worse off our country will become. We are not respected internationally. We are not just anywhere, because we have one of the worst presidents ever that anybody can imagine. We cannot continue to settle for the lust. We cannot continue to settle for less. And then this is a fight we all ready to, because, when people are silent and they're doing nothing, don't call them into politics, because the fact of the matter is that you cannot kill 2 police officers and then you jail people who did you no wrong. And then every other day you speak to Ami Bojang's children, you realize the anger and the animosity, and of course, how down these people are, simply because even if they go to school and parents are called to come, these children don't see their parents. That the little children are scattered all over. Some are gone to Bruford, some are in Yundum, some are elsewhere. That you have scattered somebody's family out of your own wickedness and evil doings. Hey, alaman fem fo moy, alaman ratol damaide. Gombe sila sonya be sabat la nyimbanko kanne. Alaman sakunda mahani tus le na fa Gambian kole. Na manke sunyaro ning kamola na fulo be kasara ka betinya ka diara la nyame. And that is very well known to every Gambian, because the commissions have exposed that this government is the worst government that probably the Gambia ever heard. And compared to Jammeh, of course, human rights was a bigger issue, and then table. So there is no way we would compare you to the former regime. But when it comes to development and other issues pertaining to governance, you cannot beat your chest for anything, because you did nothing better than the regime. So we don't intend to stay here too long, but of course periodically we will continue to have these conversations, because this regime, we are calling on every sound-minded Gambian who thinks about the progress of this country to know that 10 years should be enough for anybody. 10 years should be enough for any president. And then to say that this is what our constitution says. But look at it again. This regime told us that Jammeh was bad. Of course, Solo Sandeng and other people died for what? Electoral reforms. But this regime, after 8 years, came back to bring back those laws that Jammeh imposed on us. And those same laws, like you have to pay $1 million to become, presidential candidate. And these were the things that we were fighting for in 2015, 16. And then this is why some people died for that change to come to Gambia. But of course, this regime has backtracked all the way back there and make sure that they brought back those laws simply because Barrow want to self-perpetuate. It's high time that we all collaborate collectively to fight this regime, and not just in a way to say that, oh no, yalan luwa kote. Itolle nyanta nunko luwa le falinka luwa kutolo dundi bare itolle balanta luwa kutolo dundi ola, because ilafita mwina la puli itolle damale tara sirinje ko itolle barakatan tolti. Kamurun ka luwal dundi ka ko ni momo yetol mansa kunda do kulalo neng ise sorong baren tol mi yalon ko do balo mantra do ko la mansa kunda tol min ka mansa kunda tombo ni tol yen tol bale neng kuta bola woto ndeysaan ku la ko waxoon 2016 you will never believe it. Kondok, let's put our differences aside and see that our country is sinking, and it becomes divine that it is our collective responsibility to rescue that country from this clueless regime. Because you know, at the expense of the masses, because this government is doing nothing for the masses if not to kill children, and of course come back and say, and not even to apologize for it. Look at the parents whose children died. To this day, they cannot even get justice. Imagine wearing your police uniform to go to work and they kill you for nothing simply because of their political desires. Imagine millions and millions of aid money coming into Gambia and just a few people to put it in their pockets. Imagine somebody telling you you will move from buying cement from 200 to 600 within this short space of time. That they said they will bring a bag of rice to 700, 800, 900. Probably they're mistaking that for a bag of cement. We can bring about that change through a united opposition front. All-inclusive government is what Gambia needs, not a single opposition government, whatever. Until we come together to understand that we will stand to ensure that our democracy is defended, that no person rules this country beyond 10 years. The constitution that they keep failing, that we will ensure that there is a constitution come after 2026, that this country will actually be put on the right footing, and of course honesty and honesty will be instituted, and of course corruption will completely be a thing of a past in our country. But even corruption is aided and abetted by society. If you have a position in government, your entire either family and even society thinks that they can all fold their hands and you're going to give them money when your salary cannot even settle your personal bills. These are the things we do in our society every evening. Because you're a director, people would come asking. They force you to go and steal what does not belong to you. It's just for people out there. Nobody plucks money from trees in offices or in the West. So what a society kind of aids and of course plays a catalytic role in aiding and abetting corruption in our society.
Way do mala mo safa ko tambang ku jama kalamata safa way man ku kalamata ka fa nyadi jawara la administration jama fan kalamata ji ya jama jamano e wulu wala kono o fon ita ku jama fono la moyenji so mo se siya ko hakil maya ye fanyinenka ita ye mello ye ta karandi men juma le karanda nga misalota jelle den kilo la ya jamme ka jey dalla adoto na nundo ko woli ke sinni manyaade le den kilo lam ka tari ko le satanye wala jalol le ka tara mara ngala wala ka fanya ko nyina kata kunu nga kala fanyo la ko wol kalam to wala nyama sun joto la story long wala nyam safar la man siano television man soronu internet man soronu safo mom ye ko record. So ninsida ngamira bi ndel be ngamello yaaje mala ko de TRC reveal mbega kala mudala because I record that but nisida ya mira mato nyantala nisida ya mira ko kunu wo jalol me denkilo la wo denkilo le futa tantal ma bi nga foko yaaje me Gambia la masala nung sanji ke malul ko man fem moy fo sejo bar ñol be denkilo la yaaje me iba jeyir man fem moy ami bar ñol be denkilo la iba jeyir ani ñi Gambian article membe ndalla jeroto na moy roto jalol me yalon ko ay ñi ñaake wole jale yakaye ye denkilo la wol be mëna falantal ye wala perspective wala mondi yaaje mem ma sa kendol bar bi ndal ngalo nako ku jama bi jaay menke tiñaro ay mol fa mol tora ku man tora jamal le so wo history me ita ya soto abotana min do mafan. That's one perspective. You didn't have the full picture. The same thing with Gambia's political history. Kabri ya jame natanati ye kemuna ke jawara tinya ka PPP man sakunda tinya ka kangole la nyin kama pour ga fan justify ko de la nyanta ke le president de Gambie. So wala ku kende tijara be même fal. Ku tijara be même balance hani la ku keno na ba fula in a way me ya lon ko abatare ni nyanda wol mulu njaw yan so nite you rely on that ya adama barona na ya jame mol sabah fankan na ni wol sita wol fana the same narrative be wol promote kam ifana be lala nyina ko nyinam toñaat tribalism tara na ta nyine a wulu Gambia nyine a sabatindi Gambia nyine ba wajabe ni kan Gambia and non me yalon koy be da ke gam political bi ni ajube 80% wala 75% or more Gambia din men be political kono bi men ka diama ko wala abe mo funding kel men yalon ko lu ya jame jamano le wala la ya jame jamano be start la wato mena tretal be dindiya so lu muna fono la moy Gambia kunun ko so dal nyanta men kala wala ke hakil maya ka itani lako tribalism is just a political tool 100% is a tool for dominance ibu ka ke fengo fenna kamma fokola bar me ya ko be wulu wala music ni music well safo the recent episode me ya start wala ngabeng attack taro West Coast Radio and Peter Gomez baka chalaje so mbe use la as an example ka itandi go nyim problemo be is based on economic interest, is based on political dominance or cultural dominance. It's as simple as that. Fengo fenneti anu mbo dalilo litan la molla to show you ko there is absolutely no tribalism in our country. To the extent that people make it look like, not that there is not bigotry. People are bigoted because they think it is camera ko. It ada kuru go taraje. Mo fi ngol yamini to lala mo fi yala fi sada cool bit. Tubabul bi men yamene ko tubabu ya kola fente kere me an ka nyaata so ni dara mane kunda bo mo sifal tar la jelo kon tal mu man ko din tal la fi dara karnyol is tara surwa kunda ba tar raje tara fula kunda ba tar raje momo mendi nyanta titar la wolle nyanta nyanna wolle nyanta tesit la wolle si sifala wala mu ala ite tomo ay ke wol ay sama nan dunya ay blando bo mo sifal la ko nyina be kala ado nyina be kala la silo so ka titar wala wo problem tawor ba ni astam bindu wala doro yay fay tan ko okay ba on dama ñinati telefisara karñol to doro fi zamante ya dunda ko on doro yetti ñaaro samana so from that perspective ko man ko yamé telefisara mo doldi wala surwal yamé telefisara ñun doldi wala flol yamé telefisara ñun doldi ni en nal tari ko kono jube ito aussi fa alter lay ba kabram politiko a dabla je doro a da afana findi dara because it's a weapon me yalon ko politician will ka use they are the most guilty when it comes to using that weapon. So the music industry now follow you traditionally. Bao attack ko molke e fansu molle fasa ibuke del dol fasa me yalan ko ni man tara ko kele. Nsa foko Gambia Kora was always there. Kora be jele kabrin chuk. Sur wala kontingo be jele kabrin chuk. Ina tan la kasen ka kundaldo gat la fala because da ko nyome. Kasen ka kundaldo la ñu mirawol be jele dis gamba. So their traditional instruments have always been there 100% of the time. But with time, music has evolved. Ni modol la kool dun tanyo kono men yalon ko ni manke are kilomati wala musical instrument wala men bako guitar no sifal ngawol dabla ni na kool fa. Ni am sangom la den kiloma ko guitar fon badantale. So but basically just for analysis sake, we have our traditional music. La lo ke ba nyol lam men yalon ko purely 100% kora bu ka fendo bla kono. Wala men be balafon ko sola ko la balafon man ko dal wo be bulu je sur wala halam be bulu flow la riti be bulu so that is traditional music. Everybody had their cultural niveau use la jamani may ka denkilo la ni wo kamol la men yalon ko za traditional jalia basically was it so music industry evolved ala evolution ko nyaadi le you ban soul create wala ko men ka kora ko sidda ma bu ka ko kora ko sola muso be sira da kora ba ko sila bari me ya commence tafo maybe that can be argued but jale ba ya start ka kora band create wala ko mare band dol be rano man joko tara di ngan salam ban ñol ko you know ye da blandi but amanda wala ni na radio Gambia music national troupe musical troupe la me alon ko kora ba ko no le balafon ba ko no le halam ba ko no le riti ba ko no le you know Gambanyol be ba kono wala mi Gambia la adol be la ke kilindi ya music band create so music evolved wala nyama ko ni manke ko ko se fen kilinda mat me ko se fengol bula la ñoko no ngi nyami nga music ko create yeah so within that context you have bands like Gelawar, you have Soro Koto band, Abdul Kabir Nyol Botawolto, Ifam Bondi band Nyol, Super Eagle, Kumare band Nyol Fajan, and Salam band Nyol Fajan, all be creator all. So competition on that was it. Jumal la band better at musician all the Mali Kafunyoma, bands all create, Nitara Senegal Super at one Nyol BJ, eta Lemzo Jamano Nyol, Omar Pen Nyol band, Chon and Ramdan, all be. That is the beginning of modern music in Safono, in our cultural context in the Gambia. Yeah. So bands all fana, Jamano Bukalabang, and then they start breaking up. Osifa Lemikaji, Dolia Bondi, for example, Gelawar Banyol, Musangom, Yol Fintra Walakono, then now Soto Koto Banyol, Abdul Kabir Yol Fintra Walakono, Jaiba still now he's maintaining his band, Tata Alamani and Kafa Kalakabrata Bada Salam band, Safasa Montrekirin Kotege. So these things happen. But Tamet and Safo in the late 90s, early 2000s, music sifa koto ko me ada blanang Gambia music ko. Nyim dol creator wala ko ka fanya. Sorry, I broke my finger, so I broke my finger. Wala na sitting up but I'm good. So 90s onwards nying rap cool ye da blandi wala ko. Ne ala kilo wakan ti artist law yela follow fugitive band ñol born Africans ñol Penchami Galaxy wol baby keri nanu yaja. So wol it started the evolution of music. Wol katara ni rap style musical like because of maybe American influence in the culture or because Gambia ka reggae mel la moy reggae culture fana influenced the born Africans ñol and stuff like that. Rebellion ñol fana finta wol la single artists or groups of artists. Or fanaka, Osifa le create. But ne ajubela den kilo bega tan lari mafan kilo rap style, I don't know, pop, I don't even know what kind of genre you're gonna call it. But those were the things that were happening. So you have so many different people from all different ethnic groups, but jamaji maika den kilo lari mana English. Meng somebody who stood out and became more recognized, for example, Jalex Nyol Sifa Okundu. He stood out of that group mainly because he embraces culture and then kilo and will understand. And then the beat also is very traditional. So those kinds of people, they stood out. Nina the Galaxy crew, Musango Moding or Fongama, I think he ended up almost being, being solo. So people followed him as well. So those things, they evolved and then they changed. So they set a standard or they were the first standard bearers for going back. So in Savo, those were the pace setters. Then we'll call out and dol nara fintina. Badi bunkanyol, estinyol, ikafanyali, oboynyol, karanying, atagnyol. They were all in that second generation of rap music. So if you look at it, they all rap. But say for example, somebody like Jizzle doesn't rap. His kind of music, he might be one of these young Gambian musicians, but he has a different trajectory in his music than say for example ST is pure Msavo rap. Let's just say rap. It's exactly the same thing Attack Fanakameng is rap. So obviously those two people are appealing to the same crowd of young people that rap appeals to. So the competition would naturally be there. Why is Jizzle not a part of it? Let's just use that as an example. Why is Broke and Kombonka? Broke denkilola maninga kaonla, Kombonka kala maninga kaonla, ST kala maninga kaonla, Oboynyol kala maninga kaonla, but the final music style is different from ST because it's not purely rap. So you know Beka keni maninga kaonla. So why are those people not complaining to maningo komaningo the mal support and when they are struggling compared to ST? But ngani mo sabolo for Jizzle attack ST mainly because Jizzle is also popular, but Niata you in Nigeria no learning Afro popular, but I think that's what they call it. I don't think look at like this kind of like lover boy thing. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying that's the example of his music. Yeah. So ST, I think he purely raps. Just get the lyrics and spew them out with the beat in the background. I think he does it in Mandinka, Attack does it in Wolof. So near Jube, all these bands that I listed from the 70s, from the 70s coming down, they all have their fan base. The fans only promote, the fans only support, radio will be playing everywhere you go. There was no feud there. So now, Because you have the same general targeting the same audience as the other person. The only difference is his lyrics are in a different language than yours. Why is that a problem? Kabrin time when I start catching in Kabana you knew this was gonna be the problem. Because it doesn't matter. Even in menka rap Kajal, sometimes the lyrics they use are very contextual. Even though they speak English. So lafta start la wolto ko attack audience so men target wala nyanda support la wala nyanda promote la nabita international tola it will be based purely on how he is received by his audience or his fans. So now he sees ST as a threat or a competition that he needs to tackle. So how do you tackle him? Maybe, there's a difference in the language that we use. That is why he gets more promotion or more recognition, because he sings in a language that I don't sing in. Using that as an example, purely 100%, this is an economic-driven agenda. It's the reason why we have tribalism in our country. It's a pure and simple. I want to use that as a segue into why I think that is the issue, because Nyajube, Ngasta Damando go. Previously, Gambia Janin Jawara Binanam, Womunetun Tuba Maralo Bekere, Janin Tuabul Kanana, Munabekere no, colonial, like traditional institutions. Ibafala, Kayor, Bawol, Sin, Salum, Fuladu, Nyomi, Europina, Jimara, Walla Bekere no. Mol Yela Sefol Soro. Later like after say, well, but Mansolam, Nyomi Mansa, Jara Mansa, Kia Mansa, Jolofi Mansa, and all that. All the way back to the Manding Empire, people ruled based on traditional institutions. Nobody was competing anywhere until colonialism came. So after that colonialism is when we started having all these issues. Yeah, if somebody wants you to fail, they will tell you to ignore your history. Because history, that's where you draw inspiration from. You draw inspiration from to show you that there are people in the past who are exactly like you, same culture, same background, same everything, who succeeded in this or that endeavor. You can do the same. So you draw inspiration from that. Or you learn lessons from it. In the past, this person who was like you did A, B, or C, and this is how they failed. You learn your lesson, and then you improve. So if anybody tells you to ignore your history, they want you to fail. Absolutely 100%, and you will fail. But Mali Kawalov, if you don't know where you come from, you're not going to know where you're going. The same thing. So why can't we just reflect on the past? Which is why it hurts me so bad when people start saying, kill the tribe. What does that mean? Just because somebody weaponized an instrument, it's kind of like saying, let's get rid of fire because it burns down houses and stuff. If you mismanage it, yes. Your tribe is your identity. That's why your culture is preserved. Why do we have all these languages if God wanted us all to be just the same? But we adopted a system that tells us, Gambia is a completely whole bunch of different people than Senegal. When we speak the same language, dress the same way, eat the same food, worship the same way, everything that we do is exactly the same. But we are told, you people are Gambian, these people are Senegalese, you are different. It's the same thing. Ni nata man kunda kuol bi jele ka ke nyame suru akunda fanan kelo kuol ke nyame fula kunda ke nyame wona na manke problem for even the famous program fuga man ko ka fo like before the Bill of Rights, Africans had democracy. Near Jalol Moy ba fulen when the program fuga was taking place, ika fo na men mabeta je, and they named some fuller names, Sangare, Jakete, Jallo. They were present there. Niko Manding Empire doesn't mean completely 100% everybody in that empire was Mandinka. Niko Kayori doesn't mean everybody in there was Sere. It was a mix of people, and then you have one group that was dominant and leading. It's the same thing when you go to Senegal, but everybody speaks Wolof because that's the common language. Nidara is the same thing. Even people in Senegal in the north, when they are talking about Casamance, they start talking about, the Kankurang or, the Jola tradition. That's because that is what is prevalent in that area. There's no difference. So we have these issues that are always present in our country, and for economic reasons and the desire to rule over people, to have dominance over them, they started to weaponize it. So the language you speak is not the problem. I told him, so I'm going to mention his name before I jump into it. Another thing that is relevant is that example that he gave, which is Mondao. I post Dolagagafoko, you don't see the Akus in this whole tribal brouhaha. And he's 100% right. Immediately a light bulb went off. Exactly. We can use that as a perfect example of why tribalism is nothing other than a tool that is being used by people who want to dominate us. And nobody benefits from it but them. And that's true. So why is that? We should ask ourselves. Not that they are better than anybody. No. But when do you see people, saying, you might have your personal encounter with somebody, fine. Which is what this all comes down to. If you have a personal difference with somebody, go after that person. Don't go after their whole group. So it's the same thing. That's not to say that the Aku people are perfect or that, they don't have any issues. But no, in the wider space or, talking generally about this whole issue of tribalism, you don't see them mixed in it. Why is that? This is where young people need to learn to understand that your history is relevant. It is important. You need to embrace your identity, who you are. It doesn't make you better than anybody. It just means that you are different. You are who you are. You are unique, and you have something to contribute through your values, through your perspective on life, and you get that based on how you were raised. That is your culture. That is your identity, and its first manifestation is the language you speak. So there's nothing wrong with that. So why are the Akus not involved in all this mess? Nina Rajube Akus, we usually find them in Gambia or later Sierra Leone. Gambia and Sierra Leone. Nigeria is kind of similar in a way, and Liberia, but generally Gambia. And the origin is basically after the slave trade, the emancipated Africans. So you can trace their initial appearance on the scene in West Africa generally to that. So why are they not involved in this? So on our side, the people used to have their own kingdoms where they lived and, did the things that they did based on their tradition and their values while commingling with everybody. That's another thing in Africa. When we dominate politically, we usually don't impose our values on people. If that is the case, everybody would have been, one lineage by now. Nitara Mali B, most of them will speak Bambara, even though you have Mandinka, Jula, you have Fullers, you have all kinds of ethnic groups. They usually will speak Bambara. In other Senegal, they mostly will speak Wolof. In other Sierra Leone, they all will speak Creole or Aku, because that's the dominant language. So why are they not involved in the Gambia? This is where the issue lies, and how politics use tribe and weaponized it. You see, before the colonialists came, Gambians used to be farmers. They grow their own food. They didn't rely on anybody for anything. Whatever you ikamoilo nunko nundomol manukuto ni wonat ne manukuto ban la ya fay wala ya tu ya ke la soti ko bungon mo. They used to grow the food that they eat, basically. So they were in control of their whole entire existence. They didn't need too much. The Mbolo Sira community comes together. They build a house for whoever needs that assistance. Yela fansum pajasol de la. Then no more bije sate no more bije sate, darlal bijele, farabol bijele. So it was basically subsistence living. Those people lived happily. They grow whatever they needed. Colonialism came because of the need for materials, raw materials, whatever. They encourage people to start farming cash crops. In school, they teach you about cash crops, mostly groundnut in the Gambia. So people turn their farms that they use, kanyol doku nundame, kintol doku dame, yayal mandiake, tiyokunkol. So they started growing these groundnuts and selling them. But if that is the policy across all of the colonies that the British were in, that means that competition is now starting. Senegal, the same thing. Groundnut is their main export when it comes to agricultural produce. That's why we compare ourselves. Senegal, Jibe, yela tiol wafila Gambia, bukela tiol san or anything. Because we don't consume that much groundnut. When we make it, we have to sell it. So people's food production went down and they started growing cash crops. Initially, it was good. But when the competition mounted, the sales went down. So that means less income for you. And then on and on and on, time later, people realized, well, I'm not making enough out of this farming. I'm not already growing enough food. So that means my labor and my land is distributed between cash crops and food crops. So my food crop production has gone down maybe 60% or more. So I produce 60% less than what I used to produce. Now I'm producing 60% of cash crops, and when I sell it, I don't make enough to buy the surplus that I need for the food that I'm going to eat. So essentially, it's the same people. You don't have any new laborers coming in. So I can fall yellow sort of falifula. And then someone can fall yellow to fall war. So I fall nano men to the Yanta Balula men, Ebo Lamindo. Not your doku ninga wafi. You come so the Jebuka fall kilomas and so you still have a deficit of what? 3. So la baluot is timano. Munat timala because kuno, the same land, because land is limited. The same land maker use kila tiodo kila manu dokuje, mikela nyo dokuje, nyoni manu bukato doku la kila, but just as an example. Now you don't have that because ya kuntula sai ika tio fanan doku purka waf. So sai la bolu koleat. And then you're stuck in this situation. May along okay, ninganda bonit ya doku fanan sort of no menga ken do fanan sort of la sila mekala nyadi. Just like in every generation. There were once young people too. That's when they started looking for other opportunities. And what are those opportunities? The only industry available back then was people who were working along the coast. These dock workers, laborers at the port. Men ko do ko sakotolam is all groundnut related. Wala men kata santo do tiol samanang ina na yabla ni kulungol ko na ifta nam banjo. Wala bagasol men tuwa wol ke bonan tuwa buye samanam porodo mol men kata rada bere siara je ka o bagasol jindina. Ota mo da malam do ko. All these things are tied together. It's all about economics. When you are in the West, remember America, wala Europe, the first people they come after when there are bad economic situations is the immigrants. That is why they're taking our jobs. We don't have any jobs because of this immigration. We need to control immigration. And then that's the campaign. Immigration is why the economy is bad. So we need to go after it. You can only follow a scapegoat. So these people abandon their farms because they're not making enough as young people to take care of their families and said, I'm going in search of greener pastures. And that was to come to the coast. What was the coast? I'm trying to tie all this back to Mondau's post, which is 100% in agreement with, because you don't see Akuz in this whole mess of tribalism, and I want to make that point go, there's a reason for it. Not because they are better than anybody, but because how the thing was set up to show you politicians and people in power will do whatever they need to do just to get ahead of everybody else while they keep us at loggerheads fighting and killing each other, when traditionally we normally don't do that. And I'll give you an example, a perfect example of that as well. So it's purely a tool. So these people abandon their villages in the rural areas and their farms because they want better opportunities for themselves, and they all flocked to the colony. Because when the British came and finally declared the Gambia a territory for the British Crown, they divided it into the colony and the protectorate. The protectorate is where they get their produce from. The colony is basically their base. So within that base, all their activities are centered. Whatever they need from, the environment they get from, the rural areas, like, groundnuts and cotton and whatever they need. But when it comes to modern produce or whatever they want from Europe, that gets imported. So the ports become busy, dock workers were needed, and, people were needed for different manual labor endeavors within the colony area. Nico colony fana, it is Banjul or Batos and Combo St. Mary. Well, now we have the term Combo St. Mary's division. Combo St. Mary's is part of the colony. And to distinguish it, you have a Combo Tua Banco and then Combo Santo. Combo Santo is basically everywhere else, going, to the rest of Combo and then to the protectorate. It's all considered the protectorate. So Combo was basically cut off in two. Majority of it was known as Combo Santo. But if you want to know Combo Tua Banco, for example, Cape Point, just along the coastline. So these people migrated from upriver Gambia, Kana Banjul, so that they can find employment. So here's another problem. You divide your farm between producing your food crop and cash crop. Now you produce less food. So that means your income has gone down. But because you're not making enough from your cash crop, you decided, I'm going to find labor. You go into a place where they have no land to farm on, because Banjul Nyajibe, where can they farm? Banjul is an island. On a very small scale. Very, very, very small scale. But now man can bay, lele bije saltwater intrusion, so it's not ideal for farming 100%. So those people rely on the manual work that they can do at the ports or within the from the colonial administrators. That is also their source of income. So suddenly those people are seeing an influx of, let's consider them immigrants from the provinces coming into Banjul looking for jobs that they are already doing. So let that sink in for a minute. Either you leave your farm because you don't have enough, which is justified. So economic conditions force those young people to migrate into Banjul. And when I say Banjul, I mean the colony. Those people are also now getting scared. Okay, we have all these people coming from the provinces and they need jobs. And the same jobs that we are looking for is the same jobs that they are looking for. So ninte kata num pororo, nka man du no leke je, wala nka let's say man wala nka wala import nang, nka man bodo 50 le duni every day, man bodo ka $5 le dinaji. So 50, that is 250 in Medjila ni wala ka je nice. That's because we have, 10 laborers. But now, because of these people coming from the provinces, we have 50 laborers. So instead of man bodo talulu nka wajindi tilo, nka jele jindi sai, man bodo tanelu. That means my money has gone down, how much I make is going down. You blame that problem on the person who came and claim the rest of the job. So because I'll tell them na kundu ko men ka sodo biya because of the say, marché ko leata wala poroto ko leata because mboka duni jamaat. So now your cost of living, it stays the same, but your income level has gone down. And you're going to find somebody to blame for that, which is these people who are coming to the colony. Sadauda is the least tribalist person you will find anywhere. He never used it as a tool. He never even, appealed to it in any shape or form. But if you read his book about Folene, there's a section there where he says they used to get taunted, even on the streets in Banjul, of like Sandongo Alse. If you look at the ethnic composition of Banjul, it's mostly Wolofs and Akus. And then the people who are coming from the provinces, even though they are mixed, you have Fanas there, you have Fullers there, Asamusa Kamaranyol Sifal, Muflo, the Fafamanyol family, those are Fanas, and then you have Mandinkas, but predominantly Mandinko Lesiara in Gambia, coming from Badibu, Ki, and Yol Sifal. But Nitel Gakava Shandong Alse. So you have that ethnic composition of mostly Wolofs. I mentioned the Akus because they are present there, but they are not involved in it. The reason being, let me get into it now to show you. The reason being, the colonialist government had a policy of education in the Gambia. Those of us who are in America, we are familiar with the FACO. It was criminal to educate black people. They did not want black people to learn to read and write. It was completely criminal. So they adopted the same thing because the more people read, the more they become aware. And the more they are aware, the more they resist what is unjust towards them. So they had that hands-off complete policy about educating the people, which is why their whole entire colony, the protectorate, there are no schools, there are no means of educating. In fact, the few people who learn to read and write or become educated in the Gambia mostly missionary soul, which is why you find a lot of people who, in the early days, were easily convinced to become Christians because they went to mission schools. Which is also another reason the level of education in the country was low at the time, because men to karam they doing some kafiriya. Whether they are Mandinkas or Wallahs, they don't send their kids to school when it was first introduced, because the people educating them were Christians, which means they have different values. But to encourage them, we have schools like Mohammedan School, just to tell them that you can, send your kids to school. And which is also another reason why they introduced Islamic studies in our curriculum during the Jawara days, to encourage people to send their kids to school. We can teach them. This is just a means to educating them. And also, while they are doing that, they can learn their religion. So it started going up, which is why also the people advocating for equal rights and women's rights, one thing they need to understand is the Gambia is a traditional society. When it comes to education, people can, when schools started expanding in the country during Jawara days, there were very few, not too many schools, primary schools especially. They build them in certain areas. But once you finish primary 6, you have to go to middle school. At what age do people finish primary 6? As soon as they enter their teenage years, 13, 14, because you start school at either 6 or 7. So during that time, there was no middle school or high school or secondary school around your area, which means you have to travel to Banjul to go to secondary school. Transportation was so hard, it means you have to stay with somebody who is close to your school so you can go to school. Then they only primary 6 bank, the parents take them out of school. Why? Because at that age, you are, you are getting the age of maturity, and now they want to send you away to go and stay with a relative who's probably a distant relative, and you are a girl. I'm not going to do that, because you're going to bring shame to the family. So your education was as far as you can go in your own community, which is primary 6, you drop out. Because your dad is not going to send you, or your parents are not going to send you to a faraway land just so you can get education. So this contributed to the low rate of education for women. Some parents will totally say, primary 6 so before I just, waste half our waste in school, she will just stay at home. There's a reason why people do the things that they do. We just need to understand the context that they operated in for us to be able to understand their mindset and respect it, and then give them the alternatives. So that's just, by the way, education was mostly from the missionaries, and they were concentrated around the area that they can have access to facilities, which is the colony, which is where the administrators live. The only exception to that was they would build schools far away, maybe because they have cars back then as missionaries, they can, drive in distance. So in Fonyi, you have Jamaican Taro School and those mission schools that they had there in Buyam, I think. The only exception is Armitage, because they needed these local chiefs in order for them to administer properly. They built schools for them up country as well. So Armitage was one of them. But essentially, education was limited to a handful of people. The Akos were descendants of free slaves, so they have that access, and because there's similarity in religion of Christianity, it was more accessible to them to start with. This is why they dominated the civil service back in the day as clerks, menial office work, because they can read and write. They had that advantage over everybody else. So while people were fighting for, Porto Doku, how many dock workers and stuff, they were not involved in that, because they had the ability to read and write, and they can help in the offices. So there was no competition there. This is where they are not involved in any of this whole issue, because they, let's just say, develop themselves. They have that access to be able to read and write. At the colonial administration, they couldn't bring everybody who could read and write from Europe, so they had to rely on the local population. And the first people that this was accessible to was the Akus. Not just the Akus, but mostly Christians, which is why the first earliest participant in Gambia's politics also, if you look at it, P.S. Njai, Wolof, but he is Christian. J.C. Fay, Syrian, let's say, but he was also Christian. These were the people who dominated. Edward Francis Small, maybe he was Aku. So these were the people who dominated the Gambia's landscape when it comes to, let's call them the elite or the educated people, because of that access that they have. So they will not get involved in this whole mess when people are fighting over these meager resources of, no longer making enough money at the docks. So this animosity grew between the people who are coming from the provinces and the people who are based in the colony. And if you look at it from an ethnic composition instead of, origin, you will see mostly the people in the colony. Now that we took out the Akus and the Christians who are not, Aku, now that we take them out because of their advantage, thanks to the education, it's left with what? The Wolofs and the people who are migrating, who are majority Mandinka. Which is why in Mandinka communities you will hear stuff like Banjul Subwa, because Ruwa is not just in Banjul. You have the Fanafanas, as we call them traditionally now, in the rest of the country as well. We all live together, we mingle together, we do things together. But Niko Banjul Subwa, they are trying to make a distinction. Those were the people that they came to meet when, during their migration into the colony area so that they can find jobs. And those are the people they encountered. Those were the people that they had animosities with. It's all based on that economic foundation. Look, if we ridicule them, they will not feel comfortable, they will leave, so we'll get our jobs back. It's not because of any underlying tribal thing. And the example for that is Jawara. Payoma, Meja Anko Jawara, Atali Jawara Samanam Banjul, to put him in school, was a trader who travels from Banjul Golem, Akata Sandoro, Kabagasul Ninja Kasambana. And in Jawara Farmer Nyolo world. There's no family relationship there. But he saw the potential in Jawara because, Asutiara Farmer. So as traders, while they are sitting discussing, talking about, elder stuff, the Kachala and Isiba, you can never go on Korosuro. So I Jawara Koros he has potential. Akafa man got Mita Banjul Nabital, Pura Franasakaron, Asatuba Karon, Kabao, Tubaba Karon is the future. He convinced the old man Jawara, even though I didn't man them fen. Payoma Jalo, I think is his last name, and Almami Jawara. Even though man them fen. A Sondai idea. Who does that? Just think that for a minute. Nite a miracle telefisara karti alla ado la karola la Kenya la karo telefisara wadi. Munane beti mo dilala naina. I only have one kid and I know how I feel about that. Like who parts with their child and sends them to a faraway land with somebody that you just met on a trade route for him to raise him for you. That was how cordial people's relationships were. They don't think along these lines of Nikan Yikan Sival when you look and you can Sival no. If Payoma felt like, okay, we need to dominate these people, he's not going to propose to educating their children. If this guy also feels tradition is better than our values are better than these other people, I'm not going to give him my child to raise him for me. But that was not what happened. These two people understood each other. They valued each other. And what Payoma did, what did that lead to? We all know the Jawara's history is basically Gambia's history. So let that sink in for a minute. All this brouhaha is based on nothing but that. Economic interest. So this is where the country was. Those people who were complaining about their jobs being taken by these immigrants coming from the provinces, they started taunting them. If we mock them, if we make life difficult for them, they will not want to stay here. They will go back, and when they go, we'll get our jobs back. That was the open hostility. So those people experienced that. Of course, when they go back, they're going to tell their people what they encountered. And out of context, it's going to make it look like these people think they're better than us. Because nobody in Gambian culture, especially Mandun culture, Malafa. So that's where the animosity started growing. And then it became worse. So imagine young Jawara growing up in that. He was not even considering presidency, and he just came as a young kid, let's say, not even a teenager yet, to go to school. And he encountered that. So all through those years, he was going through that, being a part of it, or a victim of it, if you like, until he graduated school and got the scholarship to go and study, and then came back. All throughout that time, there was no representation for the people from his part of the country, which is the provinces. And during that time also, within that time frame, Second World War happened. when Gambians went to fight in Burma along the West African Frontier Force, they get some exposure. There were Nigerians in that contingent, Ghanaians in that contingent, Sierra Leoneans in that contingent, and Gambians, because that was the British West Africa. So young people always talk about what's going on in their country, and that was the time for the agitation for independence for Africa. So when they came back, they had new ideas. And what people were talking about from those countries, they saw that, it's time Africans are fighting for their independence in other regions of Africa. We're about to do the same too. So those movements started, but it was through political means. So how are they going to wield that political power in order for them to be able to fight the British and kick them out? So they needed people on their side. But with the British also understanding, there is agitation for independence and they still want to maintain their grip on the country, they started creating opportunities for elected office within their various colonies. That's why we have the Legislative Council, the Executive Council. And these places were dominated almost 100% by the people who were educated and who are almost have 100% of them from Banjul. When we say Banjul, we mean the colony. So P.S. Njanyol will be part of the Legislative Council. You have J.C. Final, all these names that we know from independence. Just because they want to give them a semblance of independence and involvement. So, for political reasons, let's say, they were satisfied with that arrangement. That is the politicians of that day. Despite the fact that majority of their compatriots in the country were not participating in any political activity, they were okay with it. As long as they can advocate for what they believed in or for whatever reason, being a part of the system. So the colony was the only place with the franchise, but even though it's not 100%, you had to be a compound owner, or as they called them back then, yard owner, for you to be able to be eligible to vote. Those in America will understand how voting restriction works with this whole colonial setup and how they're trying to suppress voters. In fact, it is happening now in Texas. We want as few people to vote as possible so that we can maintain power. And it's usually among demographics like race. So back in the day also, to give them a semblance of political power, they say people can vote and be voted for into the Legislative Council, but only people who can vote were yard owners. So it doesn't matter if you lived in Banjul or not, the yard owners were the only ones who can vote. But the movement was gaining speed. You hear in news, you've been exposed to this whole thing from other West African countries. So the movement started in Gambia too. But again, you find Juma level low and tell you. But another thing that happens when people migrate, well, and they form associations. We have them in the US. We have them in Jarankol Yakamami. I think it's Jarankol Lamia. They have an event in the UK. So when you come to a different environment, you create associations and support groups, social groups, where you all interact with each other. So civil France total no. Bafla le labra sul kafo, badebu kafo, kombo kafo, nyomi kafo, sandu kafo, so many different kafos, like depending on where the people are from, they seek each other out, find each other, and then they, join their efforts and their resources together to help each other out. For example, Nibiye Mobanda, Ikalefleya Murundala Molka, in the Mali and so those associations were created, but there were so many of them depending on region where people came from. That shows you is not because we are going to be the same, no. It was based on regional interests. So out of those associations, they were trying to see that's when Jawara returned from the education trip that he went to in the UK. So many currency they co-opt them into these associations. Karata bara jaral de alfa na sandon ko le moral ngi dablan ye sa yeke na klakol ni safer la di kam makoy nintu wabol tema communication. But the same thing that Payoma saw in him came out to be displayed. Wala te yin jelo ko okay. Alto bebe nyin ku kilo mon la coming al be for central al be, you are all facing the same challenges. The fanabara central, you know exactly what that is. Instead of al be trafata, why don't you all come together? Ali association ba killing form. Me along ko benga kafu nyoma nka nyoma ko exactly, like the Comparative Association. So that is how the Protectorate People's Society was born. It combined all the people from the protectorates into one big umbrella association or society, Protectorate People's Society. So now it has political weight, especially with the backing of young people from the provinces who are educated now and just returned from England with their heads full of these revolutionary ideas of independence from colonialism. So once that was accomplished, you almost somebody combine into one Protectorate People's Society, they see the potential called, look, our people are disenfranchised. If we're going to have any impact on anything that's going on here, the first thing we need to fight for is for the people to vote. So imagine all that time, the people who are in the Legislative Council were not advocating for provincial people to be included in the franchise or whatever. More melo. Now man can say for the many they were handpicked by the colonial government. So the Protectorate People's Society started this advocacy for the rest of the country to be franchised so that they can participate in the elections. And that is how they won that battle. And now the whole entire country, whether it's protectorate or colony, they had the right to vote and choose people. So imagine who they're going to vote for. The same people that brought the franchise to them, the same people that advocated on their behalf, the same people that are from the same place as them. Because they saw them, they recognize them, they know them. Which means the old guard politicians are done. Because here's a new force. You are just the colony. Just imagine the Gambia, the entire country, the Gambia, against Banjul alone. What chance do they stand when it comes to number of votes? None. So they started getting angry because now they're taking our power away from us. And who are those politicians? The likes of P.S. Njai. And even before the Protectorate People's Society was formed, we see a semblance of that divisiveness, not divisive in the sense, but an attempt to at least make a inroad into the political sphere. Gaba Jahumpa. He formed the Gambia Muslim Congress. Why would he call it Muslim Congress? Because look at all the politicians around him then. They were all Christian. All the people advocating in politics, being active, they were all Christian. So when he said Muslim Congress, and they were appealing to the Christian and Aku communities mostly. So when he said Gambia Muslim Congress, with that Muslim in there, he gets the sympathy vote. So he was trying to make a niche for himself in that political base, as small as it is. So you can say that was the first manifestation of sectarianism in our politics. Maybe not ill-intentioned, but because he sees things differently. Muslims have no representation here. All these people that are advocating, even though Gaba Jawampa is Wolof, P.S. Njai is Wolof, but all the people who are in politics now are not Muslims. So, you know, we're just going to jump in and be the representative voice for the Muslims. Maybe there's no ill intention there. But it already carved out a niche to show people, go, if some of you are different, this is where you need to be. You see how these things play out. But now came the PPS, Protectorate People's Society, succeeded in getting the franchise to the rest of the country. That means all of you are now swept away because the power of the provinces is coming into the political playing field. And those people, they know no politician other than the PPS and the members of the PPS. So now there's a new enemy, the PPS, Protectorate People's Society. We need to go after them. And what is the easiest way to target them? These are provincial people, Mandinkas mostly. Tribalism was born in our politics. It's as simple as that. We need to go after these Mandinkas because they're trying to dominate now that they have political power. And maybe there was a bit of fear there too because they know the history of what happened to those people when they migrated to the colony. Imagine now if we win independence and they're the people who are going to be in power. Where do we start? We have no chance with them because they already see us a certain way because of what they experienced during their time here. So the rhetoric was mounting. If you read Bakre Rice's book, there was an interview he had with P.S. Njai, and the things he said there, I'm not going to repeat here, I shared them one time. It was very unsavory. But it was born out of the need for political leverage. Whether he believed it or not, that's, you know, something he will have to confess to, or, you know, we cannot verify that. But he said those things about Jawara and his Mandinka origins. It was to seek political leverage. But the fact of the matter is these people, they opened up the country for everybody to participate, following the footsteps of E.F. Small. No taxation without representation. Why are you taxing these people from all over the country, but they have no voice in how you make the decisions about their lives? So there was nothing wrong with those people going about advocating for the inclusion of everybody in the country. And they did. So now they became a political force. That's how they transformed it. Since we can use this, we can use our power as a protectorate people society and influence the government so much that they now change the constitution so that our people can vote. Maybe we have some political force that we can, carve out of this. Protectorate People's Society become Protectorate People's Party. They registered as a political party to jump into the political playing field. That's PPP. That's the story of PPP. And the subsequent elections proved their point. The people chose them over the existing establishment politicians. And that led to bitterness. During that time too, maybe people said stuff that was unsavory, because that's politics. People say stupid things sometimes. But now that, the protectorate people also see their potential, like, okay, we're going to win political power, the table started to turn. Exactly, the colonial policy of divide and rule, apartheid basically, is what led to this. If everybody was educated and the franchise was open to everybody, but that's not in their interest either. So it all comes down to power and influence. That's it. Nothing else. African societies are not built on that. We're built on values. But then we have this colonial system imposed on us that seeks nothing but material wealth and power. And they taught us how to get that. And then we embraced it. Well, at the top of the hour, I said, I've been here an hour. I said, like, if somebody tells you to ignore your history, they want to dominate you, they want you to fail. If you understand God, this is how they manipulated us and led us down this path, we can undo it. When we talk about this whole issues of tribalism and we all get frustrated, everybody started talking, look, like we all marry each other, we all live together, there's Santa de Kutfen, and it's all true. That's because traditionally that's who we are. We don't see each other in light of that. We just see a good person, we embrace them. Just like Payoma accepted Jawara to be educated in his household, and Jawara's dad said, okay, take it. You just see a good person and know he's a good person. It doesn't matter, what language they speak. That's how we are raised. That's how our value systems are. So because the colonialists came and weaponized it, now everybody's jumping, kill the tribe, tribalism this. Let's undo what they did to us. That's where the solution is. If you say Mandinkas this, I'm going to get angry because I am proud of who I am. It doesn't mean I think I'm better than anybody. That's who I am, and I am proud of it. I know there's nothing wrong with being who I am. So anytime you say that, it doesn't matter how objective I am, I'll be emotional about it. And when people are emotional, generally, I thank God I don't have that emotional reaction to stuff. I approach things with a logical, rational approach. I might show emotion. I might get emotional in the process, but my launching pad is always rational. I try to be, at the very least. I might get frustrated with you and show emotions, which is a natural human thing. But when they throw all these things at us, maybe out of frustration or because we need to learn our history. And that is also a challenge, like a big challenge. Why? Because it's not recorded to a certain extent. We have to rely on third parties like Barclay Rice coming to the Gambia during those independent days to write about the story. Otherwise, everything is suppressed. How much can you learn from GRTS when it comes to the history of the Gambia and how things used to be back in the day? Those files are probably all gone because we don't value it. But unless we go back, which is why, Alaji keeps saying it, this colonial space. The whole mentality, how we look at the world, everything is how the colonialists imposed it on us, and we need to change it. If we don't change it, we're not going anywhere. You see the problem as tribe when the problem is not. You don't attack people's tribes and expect them to sit down. They're not going to do it. You're only going to get pushed back. So that colonial thing, going back to what Usman said, our problem started with that. So now here is a political force from the provinces advocating for their own inclusion in the political process. But when the doors were open for them, they had political office now, they look among themselves, who are we going to select to be the, Secretary or Minister of Agriculture? Who are we going to select to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs? They started picking, and they realized the number of people educated from the provinces are actually small. So we have to rely on the people who are already educated within the system. They understand it a little bit more from the colony, for them to help us, build this Gambia that we want to take away from the British. We need those people. So they're going to turn to the same people, which is the people that were afraid, okay, if these provincial natives get the power, we are done for. So now here's an opportunity. In fact, they need us. They're going to rely on us. Okay, let's join them. So now that they're going to rely on you, you might go in there with a little bit of, this is all human psychology, with a little bit of, okay, maybe once they have all the educated people they need, they will just get rid of me because they don't need me anymore. So before that happens, I'm going to fence myself in by bringing my own people also to help me out. So if I'm not there, at least have somebody in the system. Cronyism is born, nepotism is born, corruption is born. And then that led to anger also. PPP Bamboo from, its earlier days. We campaigned on foot, on bicycles, going around the country. Now that we have independence, they're giving all the positions to the people from Banjul. And when they say Banjul, they see ethnic identity as well, because that's how the composition was. So they started getting angry at the PPP. How can we do all this work? We see the example. When Barrow was first elected president, people kept asking him, are you going to hire people from the APRC? These are the people responsible for all the destruction in this country. That was the question they kept asking him back then. 2017, go to the videos and check. Now that you have government, are you going to hire people from the PPP? Because there is that suspicion there, that animosity. We just need to reflect. Let's not just follow the crowd and screaming and yelling. APRC was responsible for propping up Jammeh. Jammeh is evil. So now that we have a new government, those people should completely, in fact, ban the APRC. We don't want them anywhere near power. That's what we were saying. So you can understand the provincial natives also being angry. We fought this fight with all the denigrations and Santonko say Su or something like that. With all that, now they're going to give them the positions that we, kick the British out of. We need to be, rewarded also. But Jawara being Jawara, he saw that this country, in order for it to move forward, we need people who can actually man those positions. It's not just going to be out of political patronage. I'm going to hire people that I know can do it. He actually said it in his book. Even one of the last colonial governor of the Gambia told him, don't be in a hurry to Gambianize your civil service. There are some experts who have been here in the civil service. Retain them, let them train the new batch of Gambians coming in before you hand over. Even that was not welcomed by the people from the colony area who were already educated. Why is he keeping the British? We kick them out. They need to all go. So those also have their beef. They all need to go. We need to, Gambianize the civil service. But he knew there was truth in that. Like if I kick all these experts out who've been in the civil service, even though they were our colonizers, we can still use them, their expertise, to help guide the process to where we can fully Gambianize. But the educated elite saw that if one British is present in the civil service, that means one Gambian is not going to be there. So they also got angry at that. And then the provincial natives got angry at the PPP. Why? Because we fought this fight and now you're hiring people from Banjul who used to taunt us, and now we're not getting the positions. So the push and pull started. Which is why when Jawara fell out with Sirif Diba, I think that was in 1975, about 10 years after the Gambia's independence, most of the provincial people flocked to Sirif Diba. Because there was that deep-seated, anger at Jawara for hiring people who never contributed or lifted a finger towards the campaign of the PPP in unseating the British government. The credit for that, mostly 95 to 99% of it goes to the PPP. So those people got angry, and then when eventually, because of politics, him and Sirif had a falling out, and Sirif formed NCP in 1975. Most of Badibu went along with him. He had inroads in Kiang, he had inroads in Jara, not so strongly, and then Bakau, which is traditionally Baka was divided. Cape Point and all that was part of Kombotuba Banco, and then the rest was Kombasando. They also joined it. Because why? You know, we fought for this change, and here we are. Trying to read that part there. Oh, okay, yeah, got it. So yeah, basically, there was that element which I talked about also, like, you know, education. People were reluctant to it in general as well. It was not a give me your child, I'm going to take him, and then he accepted it. There was some reluctance. Of course, the moms are also going to be involved, and nobody wants to send your child away. So there was a lot of issues there. But the bottom line is these two people trusted each other enough to say, I'm going to educate your child because I see potential in him. And then the other said, okay, I trust you enough that you're going to take care of him. I'm sure if he was a girl, it was not. Jawara was a girl, that was not going to happen, unless she got married and taken off. So this was the issue. In order to move the Gambia forward, out of that sincere desire to see that the Gambia progresses, we've got to put people in positions who can actually man those positions and have them man those positions, and then retain some of the British officers to be able to train the incoming civil service. Until we are satisfied, then we can also let them go. But that led to animosities. So this is where the Gambia stood. That push and pull was there. And this is where the origin of it came. But Jawara, during his time, nobody is going to accuse him of fueling tribalism in that country. Nobody in their right mind. Unless they have a personal beef that they want to address. Nobody's going to accuse him of that. In fact, Yaya Jammeh, when he first came to power, what did he say? Mandinkas are their own worst enemies. Why? Because Jawara was here, they were the only people opposing him. Nobody else was. So if he was promoting tribalism, he would have been the favorite of the Mandinkas and nobody else. But everybody else embraced him. But deep-seatedly, people had some anger towards the fact that the things turned out the way they turned out. Without seeing Jawara was trying to hire people who were qualified, at least on paper, to man those positions. They saw that he excluded us, even though we were the ones who did all the heavy lifting, being the Democrat that he is. So nobody in their right mind will complain or campaign or say that Jawara once campaigned on a political or tribal platform. And being a traditional Gambian, like Osman is saying too, he didn't want to embarrass people, but when he sees corruption, you know, he didn't micromanage, basically, let's put it that way. The thing that the soldiers accused him of was corruption, rampant corruption. But when they did the commissions, you'll find that directors, heads of departments, they amassed more wealth than Jawara ever did in his 30+ years. In fact, he almost lost his house in the UK, being a former president. If he had been corrupt, how much money would he have had? The only land that I know is his Fajara residence and his garden in Abuko, slightly opposite the airport. But you could say, you know, like he was faulty in that he didn't prosecute or was not tough on corruption as it was obtaining in the civil service to a certain extent. But, you know, that beside the point, nobody, since tribalism is what we're talking about, will accuse him of being tribalist in any way, shape, or form. Look at the composition of his government. Look at the policies that he implemented. Look at his demeanor when he was politicking in the country. Nowhere will you see a hint of tribalism in there. And then came the coup d'etat. It might have been in the civil service. Like I said, these people were afraid once these provincial natives get the education that they are seeking or the education that they lack, which is why they are not in the civil service, they are going to kick us out and hire their own people. So before that happens, we're going to put our own people in there. So cronyism, and then you start seeing a certain segment of society dominating the civil and public service. When you watch the TRRC, you would see the former permanent secretary, Ministry of Defense, was saying it. Because Sana was complaining about it. In the army, there was a clear bias against people from the provinces, because majority of the people in the officer corps who were responsible for promotion in the Ministry of Defense, they promoted their own people. That led to, partly to the anger, which is why the coup was instigated mostly by provincial people. in fact, almost entirely by provincial people. Sana's testimony, go to TRRC and watch it. And when they asked the permanent secretary, Ministry of Defense, he said yes. There was an element of, call it tribalism, call it regionalism, but people from the urban areas were preferred in terms of promotion more than the people from the provinces. The highest they got to was lieutenant. The rest were, whenever you hear a captain or anybody else, they're either from the Banjul area or related to somebody in that area. So that bias was there. That led partly to the anger in the civil service. So when they were saying it, it was not against the Mandinkas, being in positions of power and then cutting everybody else out. We can watch that TRRC to see. So that's how that is tied to that. During those first 2 years from 1994 to 96, Jammeh, if he says anything about tribalism, he was going after his own people. He said so many nasty things about his own ethnic group, the Jolas. To a certain extent, he was kind of self-blaming for their own plight in the country. We can go back to the archives and see it. Not that he's right, I'm just saying that's what he did. But when he was, during that time, he convinced everybody, by 1996, I'm not going to run for election anymore. We go back to the barracks. We are soldiers with a difference. Then 1996 came, he changed his mind. That's when he started politicking. Remember I said when Jawara and Sirif Duba had a falling out, Sirif formed NCP, and most of the provincial natives who were kind of angry at the PPP government for excluding them became Sirif sympathizers. And because of that, being the main opposition, NCP, and the strongholds that they get in the provinces, Jammeh used to say, Jawara, Mandingol, Mufanja, Walete, Jawara Bijan, Tadi, yes, tell the Malaka oppose. But he leaves out that very important and critical part. They're not opposing him because he's Mandinka. But if they oppose their own, why are you now complaining if they oppose you and saying it's based on tribalism? There must be another reason to that. So after the coup d'etat, everybody was holding their breath like, okay, so just with the difference, they're going back to the barracks. Jawara is now out. Sirif Duba is the most prominent politician. So if Jammeh leaves, Sirif Duba is going to be the next president. People were holding their breath, waiting for that time. But when he was ready to launch his political bid, he also recognized that threat and he banned him. Banned the NCP, banned the PPP, banned GPP of Hassan Musa Kamara because he knew they had political capital. So now the people were like, what are we going to do? And if you look at Jammeh around that time, the people that surrounded him, they even called him co-president, was Baba Job and Mandinka. Look at the most prominent people who helped him establish his political base and his political movement. They were mostly Mandinka. So when he banned all those parties, he thought, okay, now I'm safe. Nobody who is prominent is going to be able to challenge me. PDIS was still there, but their brand of politics didn't appeal to the Gambians to that extent that they were seen as a political threat. So that was 1996. But because these political bases were all there, everybody, holding their breath, waiting for the transition to end so that Sirif Duba will be elected president, now realize that he's not going to be able to contest because the soldiers decreed that he cannot. So they got their thinking caps on and like, we need to do something. PPP is banned, GPP is banned, NCP is banned. These are traditional political parties. All their members and supporters were waiting for this transition to end so that they can jump back into the politics. What are we going to do with that base? Let's form a new party, all of us, select a candidate, and jump into the political race. That's how the UDP was born. The UDP was based off of the base of those political parties, PPP, GPP, NCP. After they had that meeting and they agreed, it's basically a sort of tactical alliance. Who are we going to select? Because during the Jawara government, we had a parliamentary system where ministers were also members of parliament. So when they banned the government and anybody who was once a minister in that government, it included a lot of the MPs as well. So they cannot select anybody from among those prominent politicians. That's where Lawyer Dabo's name was floated. He became famous in the 1981 coup when he represented Sirif Duba. That's how I even know about, that's how he was introduced to people like me. Like, oh, Sirif Duba loyal, because Sirif Duba loyal. That's how we know, like, we don't know who he was, but Sirif Duba loyal, and everybody like, oh, okay. He made a name for himself back then in 1981. Even that Kukoi coup d'etat was part of that frustration. What many people don't know, Kukoi was a politician. He ran on the NCP ticket in Fonyi, and then he was defeated. So after that, shortly after that, it was when he launched the 1981 rebellion. He was angry at the system. Again, the neglect of the provinces and their exclusion, because they were frustrated at every turn, whether they were looking for jobs or whatever. So that same grievance was what led him to politics. He was a teacher before that, I think. And then when all that failed, he launched a rebellion. But because of his ties to NCP, Sirif Diba was implicated in that coup. And Lawyer Dabo was his lawyer back then, defending him, not just him. So that's how he was recommended. Like, he's a lawyer, you know. Even here, most people who go to Congress or the senators or elected office for politicians, they usually study law. And when he was approached, you know the history. He tells you how it all went down and who he consulted among his people, and they said, you can accept it. He accepted to become the leader of the UDP. Immediately, those, you know, bases were all revived, re-energized, and like, yes, we have somebody that we can rally behind. I remember when I was the first rally in SLO that they did, I went to it, and while Juara was speaking, they said I was in prison when I heard that they banned the PPP, the NCP, the GPP. I was down, like I didn't know which way forward the Gambia was going, because now I can't think of anybody who can challenge these soldiers now, which means they're going to be in power forever. So he said he was down and downcast. But then when he heard that Lawyer Dabo has been selected, that's when he celebrated, because he knew they have somebody who is competent. So now Jammeh saw that popularity and he was like, oh, this is not going to work. We have to do something about this. That 1996 election, that was tense. There was not enough time for him to create a brand or a strategy against the UDP back then. So it was purely 100% intimidation, using the soldiers and state resources during his campaign, beating people. You remember the incident in 1996 at the Denton Bridge? That was a point of testimony at the TRRC. That was the reason why. Because this was in August 1996. We had elections, I think it was in September of 1996. Yeah. So it was a very short period of time. Either September, but yeah, UDP was formed in 1996 August. That definitely is the case. But I think the elections that year was in September 1996. So he didn't have enough time to create a political brand that was going to be effective against this new force, because he knew the people who backed the UDP and what their political capital was. So it was purely 100% intimidation. A lot of people, in fact, believe that that election was rigged or stolen, because when they cast the ballots, there was no counting on the spot. They will take the ballots, put them on military trucks, and transport them to the counting centers. And nobody from the opposition was allowed on those military trucks. So you tell me, was that fair? You cast your vote, you count. The first time we did that was 2016, counting on the spot, and he lost. So if we gather the evidence, you will know that Yahya Jammeh actually lost in 1996, because military governments were not popular back then. Sierra Leone was at civil war, Liberia was at civil war. In fact, Yahya Jammeh and some of the other soldiers participated in that through the economic force to Liberia. So people were very wary of military governments. So when they decided they were going to continue, and then November 11 had already happened, Khartoum attack had already happened, Farafenni attack had already happened, people were scared, like, we don't want military anywhere in government. So they were not going to vote for him. But because of that pure intimidation, like, these people are ready to die to stay in power. And the activities on that election night, the counting night, even though they did what they did, they were not sure, okay, we're going to win. They deployed soldiers to the house of Lawyer Dabo. Thank you, Cham. So you'll see some people mocking him, oh, during the 1996 election, he actually went into exile into the Senegalese embassy, because they knew they were probably going to lose, even though they did all their strategies. So if that was going to be the case, they might as well just arrest the person who was going to be declared the winner. So after that 1996, Jammeh got so scared that these people have so much political power. If I want to win the next election, because another election is coming in 5 years, I need to change my strategy. That is why he disbanded. He said the ban is lifted on PPP, his ban is lifted on NCP, because he thinks if he lifts the ban on NCP, Sirif Diba will jump into the race, and when he does, all those NCP supporters supporting the UDP will go to Sirif Diba. PPP will form their own group, and they will all join the PPP political party, and GPP will do the same. The UDP will be split. So now, instead of one big unified tactical alliance party, it is going to be 3 different political parties. That means APRC has more advantage. That is why 2001 election, all those parties were, the ban was lifted and they participated. So when he knew this was not going to happen, what did he do? He branded his politics around tribe. That was when Yaya Jammeh started. Look at the archives. That's when he started saying it's the Mandinkas. They are fighting me because I'm a Jola. He formed or framed his argument around that base. Or look at them, I never win in Bakau, it's predominantly Mandinka. I don't win in Badibu, it's predominantly Mandinka. You go to Kia and the same thing is Mandinka. But these were people who were Serif Diba's support base. Expecting when the soldiers went back to the barracks, Serif Diba would jump in the race, they would vote for him and make him president after struggling against Jawara for nearly 2 decades. 1975 to 1994. That didn't happen. So he started telling his kinfolk, we were neglected here. He called Kuko a patriot for his 1981 coup. Find the audios, it's somewhere. I can't remember exactly what occasion it was. So a patriotic citizen rose up in 1981 to topple the government because of corruption, and he didn't succeed. Kuko was in the Gambia during Yaya Jammeh's days, but Kuko couldn't align with Yaya Jammeh because he didn't believe in what Yaya Jammeh believed in. They invited him over, he came, I think, a couple of times. In fact, some people believe that he was poisoned. Jammeh wanted him on board, on his side, but his ideology was different. And he saw the tribalism. Exactly, intimidation was what they used in 1996. So, he used that tactic of tribe. We are sidelines, we've been marginalized. How many people do you see in government who are Jola and stuff? The same problem that the colonial period inflicted on the Mandinkas because people were not being able to access education back then was the same thing for all provincial natives, but he weaponized it. And now he turned people against each other. But traditionally, who do they marry? Jolas and Mandinkas usually, if you're going to say 2 tribes intermarry more than any other in that country, you will say it's the Mandinkas and the Jolas. But he brought that in and started creating animosity to the point that when you say Nko, you are a UDP supporter. So he was with the support of the state machinery and his support base and his intimidation tactics, he was successful in branding and labeling UDP as a tribal entity, out to get him or out to get anybody who is not Mandinka. And that kept getting worse and worse over time and worse over time and worse over time until 2016 when he was saying, I will bury you 6 feet deep. You are not even from here. There was no Mandinkas in the Gambia before, 1870 something. I will deport you to Mali. He was openly intimidating and insulting and threatening the Mandinkas and say, I will kill you guys and bury you 6 feet deep. You don't believe in Allah. And then I see the Fullers also trying to ally with you guys. If you see somebody going to Jahannama and you join them, you're also going to end up in Jahannama. I'm warning you. He was open intimidation on every political platform that he stood on, which is why that guy who is now in NPP, which I don't like to say his name, was giving a speech to go and read it on national television, intimidating the Mandinkas. All because Yaya Jammeh wants to maintain political power and he sees the threat coming from one political party and he has nothing to label them against. In terms of their policies, he just used tribe because the leader of that party is a Mandinka. When one of the most prominent people in Gambian politics, Singul Nyasi, was a Jola, and they used to torture him for 2 reasons. You are in the opposition, we're going to torture you. Number 2, you are a traitor to your own tribe because you should be supporting Jammeh as a Jola. But they could never break him. And look at the composition of the UDP's executive. Yeah, Jallo was the first deputy party leader of the UDP before Aji Yamsek. You look at the composition, you can tell. We have eyes to see. We need to see that. And let these people stop dividing us along those tribal lines. UDP's policies, not everybody can agree to it. That's 100% correct. Everybody agrees in that country because Halifa Saleh is a decent person, that he will be a good leader. But we disagree with him in terms of policy when it comes to how do you think you can move the Gambia forward. Exactly, Black Kasongo, I can use that. People disagree with his politics. And then they will turn around and say, oh, it's tribalism, why they don't support him. Before he became the leader of the PDR, Sidi Jata was. Can Sidi Jata even speak Wolof? But their support base is still the same. So we're seeing all this. But because some people, they have relatives. I saw Kanaji. I'll name you here, Najarongo. We argue all the time. I saw him say it's hard to fight corruption in Gambia because either your relative or somebody related to you or you know is involved in it. That's the thing. People who have a stake in it or their relatives are in good positions, which is why Gambians keep saying, oh, you are jealous when you start criticizing the government. Why? Because that is a means for them to make economic power. This is why tribalism is weaponized in that country. People use it to wield political power and also for economic power. In the Gambia or in Africa, political power equals economic power because that's how you mooch off the public and make the money that you need. So we're seeing that happening. Tribalism this, tribalism that, tribalism this, tribalism that, when nobody was talking about it prior to that period. We were all one people, united in so many different ways, respecting each other's cultures and each other's values. So we need to recognize that these people are using us in order for them to get themselves wealthy and their families wealthy while everybody is poor. So let's say Adama Barrow is in support of a fuller hegemony in the Gambia. Tell me if every fuller is okay in the Gambia today, economically. Yeah, Ajama was there promoting a Jola hegemony. Tell me if every Jola is okay in the Gambia today. Jawara was not a tribalist, but if they said he was a tribalist because he's Mandinka, tell me every Mandinka is okay in that country. How long are we going to stay here watching people come and be from poverty and nothingness to amassing public wealth for them and their families while they leave everybody else behind? But whenever they come, because of whatever tribe they belong to, we say this is the tribe that is benefiting everybody else is not. When everybody is suffering in that country. We need to get out of that mindset. When we see people in public saying things that are tribal, if I have access, I may not come out in because that's grandstanding and you know, condemning you. Yes, it's okay to condemn. People who condemn usually don't have access to the person they're condemning. If you do, you can tell them, look, I think you need to go out and apologize because what you did is wrong. But nobody should be there accommodating, entertaining, encouraging, equivocating tribalism. Oh, this person said it here, the other person said it. That doesn't make it right. Because if you think, oh, it's a gotcha moment for this particular tribe, it is not. Because the people benefiting are the ones who are actually within the system. So this is how he succeeded in doing that, that the UDP is a political, you know, a tribal party, is a tribal party, is a tribal party, until Barrow came. So now he has nothing else to offer. He's following in the same footpath that Yahya Jammeh led for him. When you tell people, they say, oh, UDP is a tribal party, and you tell them, oh, to give you an example, here is where that example came from. Like I said, Yahya Jammeh was threatening Mandinkas with death, sending Black Kasongo to TV to insult the Mandinkas and saying all the problems in this country are from the Mandinkas. And then capping that off with saying, I'll bury you 6 feet deep, you are all going to hell. And I see the Fullers are also trying to align themselves with you. Here's my advice to my Fullers because, you know, Sanawol Lemundi. If you see somebody going to hell and you follow them, you're going to end up in hell as well. It was during those times that whoever Yahya Jammeh arrested from within the UDP ends up dead. Solo Koromanyol Daboloko. It was at the funeral of Solo Kroma that Amadou Koro stood up and said, we fought this man politically, we've been fighting him politically, and he's been failing to silence us and keep us down using politics. But now he is threatening us because of who we are as Mandinkas. Nga kele politiko nga ko sifa beke jan o mankanyan sila ko na Mandinka ya na tawolo nom. Woto Mandinkolo kana fo mu UDP leti kana fo mu fendol ako Mandinko na tawolo nom wala nga wulinga na Mandinka ya fasa. That's a reasonable reaction. That was the only time that was said. Find out when Solo Kroma died. So if you say UDP is a Mandinka entity, from 1996 up to 2016, they never used that phrase except that one occasion. And because of that, you say they're a tribal entity. You have another reason. I'm not saying support UDP. I'm not saying support APRC. I'm saying the narrative is skewed, it's wrong, it's all lies. It's based on nothing other than people trying to advance their own political gain. Find a party you want to support and support them based on what policies that you think should be implemented in that country. But when they say tribalism, they're only pointing to one. And that's the UDP and the Mandinkas. But this is how our politics evolved. It's all rational, it's all economic in nature, it's all power grab in nature. It has nothing to do with cultural values or norms. Because tell me, which culture appreciates corruption, which is what the NPP government is known for? Which culture appreciates lying to the people, breaking your promises? Which culture in that country? Because that's what we are fighting against. Amassing public wealth for yourself and your family. If we're fighting against that and we are tribalists for that, now tell me which tribe are we fighting against that says those things are okay? So let us stop all this. Let's educate ourselves. Our narrative is skewed completely, depending on who the victors usually narrate history. They say the stories of the hunt will always favor the hunter until the lions find their own storytellers. Even if a lion chased you, or maybe, I don't know, a cat chased the hunter in the bush, he will come and say, I killed a lion, like Barrow keeps saying. I killed a lion when he was under a table. So when you ask them evidence of tribalism, that's the only one thing they will cite. And that was said at one specific occasion, for one specific reason, in a very specific context, that they completely ignore. But because it serves their political narrative for them to use that. They don't even know who said it or where it was said. They just hear the word Maninkaya Fasada and they go with it. That was the first time it was used. So mol la nyanda kala mo hakil maldi itel benyim bela jam ibadungol tanatel ni wol findite ka hani man findi kam fango la baluwo bako sonare momo ko gambe be yarim bi ibadungol palaso menke mako. So the young people, you guys need to know this. You need to understand tribalism is a weapon wielded by people in power to stay in power. We need to take that weapon away from them to show them, if you're going to lead us, you have to have policies that we agree with. If you don't, whenever you open your mouth and say tribe, we're going to come after you. They've already started. You see that Sidinjai with his face looking like a rotten tomato. Laying the foundation for that narrative going into 2026. We all know exactly what they did in the previous election, including the local government elections. What were they saying about Talib? I'm using that as an example because you cannot name names now without them saying you belong to a certain camp. Who is inviting tribal groups into State House? And when we started talking to them or calling them out for it, they say, oh, the Mandinka Association. There's no such thing as a Mandinka Association in Gambia. Zero. They just gather a few of their supporters and say, come to State House and say, we are the Mandinka group. Who is doing that? We are all seeing it. We are all witnessing it. But we don't want to speak the truth in that country. Why would we not just keep wallowing in this poverty and incessant nonsense that keep getting thrown at us? Where do you want to see your country go? The only way it's going to go there is through the policies of the government in power. Nobody else. People can do all kinds of nonsense on the sides. The government in power without the right policy and the right approach to development, nothing will change. It doesn't matter who is doing what on the sides. They are the critical path. And if that is not right, nothing else is going to be right. So you focusing on anything else is nonsense. It's not going to yield anything. It's just going to empower them further. It's going to keep you distracted while they keep doing what they're doing. Because there will be no consequence. The people who will give them the consequence is you, who is voting. And if you're not armed properly, you're not going to be able to vote against them. When Lawyer Dabo speaks, I say, yeah, but UDP, blah, blah, blah. When Hamad well, he's a part of the system. When Khalifa Saleh speaks, yeah, but, since 1986, it's all nonsense. Is the government doing right by you? Do they have the right policies? No, let's focus on that. Let's force them to change policy. If they change policy and they're delivering for the people, nobody's going to complain. But look at security. Are you satisfied with the level of security in the Gambia? And then you're okay with your sister walking home from her job at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. when Nawek is shutting powers off? Are you okay with that? Are you going to pick her up because you're afraid? So they're failing in security. If we pressure them and they put enough security measures in place, nobody will be talking about that. Then we'll look at the healthcare. What are pregnant women in labor facing in the hospitals? How nervous are you when your sister is going into labor or your wife is going into labor? Why are you afraid? Do we not have nurses who are trained in the same nursing schools like nurses from Senegal and other parts of the world? Yes, we do. Why are you afraid? Because they lack the equipment. Who should provide it? The government. It's not UDP, it's not DOI, it's not anybody else. So I have my child now. Okay, Alhamdulillah, there's nothing wrong with the hospitals. We all can all celebrate. Now I have to put that child in school. What is the education system now? What opportunities do they have when they finish school? Oh, everything is handy dandy there. Let's keep it going. Fine. Then you don't have anything to blame the government for. But are you satisfied? No. Will you put your child in that school? No. Who is responsible for school administration and policies? The government. Why are you not talking about that? You're talking about somebody's tribe and how they facilitate tribalism when there's no evidence of it. It's all a distraction tactic. And we got to be smarter than that. We got to see things for what they are, be able to analyze situations, put them in their proper context, and understand core. We are the people with the power. Whoever we give that authority to exercise that power will be the person in charge. And if they know we're going to exercise our power in assigning that authority to them, they will behave accordingly. But as long as we keep this push and pull, fighting each other here and there, and trying to look and scapegoat and equivocate whenever anything happens, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And the same people are going to keep, staying in power. Just imagine the president sitting there, because that's likely. That's when you would know that we actually screwed up. If we don't do something now. You are limited by the choices you have. 2026 is coming. The only people you can vote for are the only people who will be on the ballot. It's that simple. Nobody else is going to be voted for who is not on the ballot. It doesn't matter if you love Yahya Jammeh, you want to vote for him. If his name is not on the ballot, you're not going to vote for him. Find an alternative. Why? Because you agree, this government needs to go because they have failed. You do that by selecting somebody else. If enough people agree with you, that person is the best, they will win. If they don't, at least you didn't contribute to perpetuating the situation in the country. That's how we're supposed to think. Anyway, what matters, so this was like a long history. I'll back I guess next time.